Today we're talking about some logical next steps for expanding an Indomitus Necron force to the next level. Hello and welcome back to Auspex Tactics, the strategy focused 40k channel where we're all about getting the most out of our miniatures on the tabletop. In today's video we're going to talk about some logical next steps that you could take for upgrading and expanding on the Indomitus Necron contents, maybe with the aim to have a 2000 point 40k army to play with. In the video we'll talk about the strengths and weaknesses of the Indomitus army, a few general thoughts and considerations when buying Warhammer and Necrons, which kits I would personally consider as an example army list for a 2000 point force including the entire contents of Indomitus. So first of all, I would remind everyone that there will be a new Necron Codex out in October, and we've already seen that there's a few changes to various unit stat lines that have been coming out alongside the models in new packaging. It seems like a lot of unit stats and weapon profiles have had a thorough rewrite, and it's also unclear whether or not the Codex changes will be altering the points value of the units that we saw in Chapter Approved 2020. I would strongly consider holding off on very big purchases until it drops, and in general building things up unit by unit is usually a sensible way to go in Warhammer 40k. I would buy a unit, get it made and painted, and then field it in a game or two, then move on to the next thing. There will be also quite a few cool centerpiece models released alongside it as well. We've seen the Silent King, the new Monolith and the Void Dragon, and from a gameplay sort of perspective, it might make things a little bit more informed if we know the abilities and stats of these new models, as they might change the way that the Necron army works a bit. In general, I would say that when you're buying models in 40k, generally buying things that you like the look and feel of is a good idea, and not just for rules, as they do change. Though as a big gamer myself, I still enjoy buying models that have interesting rules mechanics, or just quite powerful in-game. Just remember that things aren't guaranteed that way forever. Depending on exactly what Necron dynasty you're thinking about playing, that will obviously influence the choice of the units that you bring. If you're playing Novok for example, then you're going to be wanting more assault units, as that's basically their thing. Finally, there's a bit of uncertainty as to the fate of destroyers and heavy destroyers. These guys on the right with the glowing green rods, they still have points costs in the new chapter approved, but it seems that certainly the warriors and the Necron monolith have been phased out. It's not currently 100% clear whether these guys and the destroyer lord are going to be replaced by those new locust destroyers that we've seen, whether they'll remain as they are or whether they'll turn into something completely different. I wouldn't really recommend buying these until we've actually seen the contents of the codex. So if we have a look at an overview of the actual contents of the Indomitus box, we have an Overlord, Scorpet Lord, Royal Warden, Plasmancer and Cryptothralls, 3 Scorpet Destroyers and their Plasma Sight, 20 Warriors, 6 Scarab Swarms and a Canoptek Reanimator. It comes to just under 1000 points, so pretty much half what you'd need for a 2000 point game if that's your aim. In terms of positives, they are reasonably durable with those big blobs of warriors, and the annoying to remove Scarab Swarms. They've got a reasonable amount of anti-infantry with all of those Gauss Flare or Reaper shots, and they've got a decent amount of close combat ability with all the characters and the Scorpet Destroyers. However, they are a long way from being optimised in game terms. I think the box is really quite character heavy, and probably a bit more character heavy than you really want. It usually makes sense to have a few more actual durable and damage dealing units rather than lots of support characters. There's pretty much no long range firepower whatsoever besides the Tachyon Arrow, and just in general, barring close combat, this part of the army is really going to struggle to deal with any vehicles. I'd say that these are some of the main areas to cover. In terms of kits to consider, I'd say some of my top picks for building up a robust Necron army, and things that are very unlikely to be useless when the Codex drops, are currently the Ghost Ark and the Doomsday Ark, and to get a Cryptek. Ghost Arks have pretty decent synergy with those big blobs of warriors, they can heal them, they can transport them, and they can be a real nuisance as well as they're pretty tough and can just tie up enemy units. The Gauss Flare arrays will also be pretty handy for chipping in with anti-infantry duties. The Doomsday Arks were good in the last edition and they remain good now. They're pretty much providing exactly what this list misses, long range anti-tank firepower, sitting around with a Doomsday Cannon and just nuking something each turn, and again with a fair amount of Gauss Flare arrays to chip into any anti-infantry that get close. I know that a Cryptek is another character and makes the list a little bit more character heavy, but these guys just have some really excellent synergy with Necron units. Boosting reanimation protocols is great, and also potentially providing invulnerable saves can be very useful. Until recently, Necrons did have a start collecting box, although currently this one seems to have gone absent from Games Workshop's website. It does provide a very decent discount, but it's sort of not the most helpful thing ever for adding to an Indomitus box. You get another Overlord when I'm not really necessarily sure that you will want more than one, and the Necron Warriors and the Scarab Swarms that are contained in it are the old style ones and won't match the ones from Indomitus. Not everyone necessarily cares about that, I know, and if you can find one that's somewhere with a third party seller, then it does remain a very cheap way of getting a lot of extra models. It's kind of unclear whether Necrons will receive a new start collecting kit in the future, or whether they'll just have to make do with the 40k starter kits, the recruit and elite editions. They can be an option if you want some more warriors and Scorpec destroyers, though it would mean that you would get repeats of the characters. Other units that I'd think about, if you're particularly interested in them, are things like Lichguard and Triarch Praetorians. Lichguard are very durable, and having good durability in close combat is certainly good in 9th edition, as they can bully other units off objectives. Triarch Praetorians look like they might have been getting a bit of a buff to their profile from the new datasheet that they've seen in their packaging, which I covered at the weekend. Immortals could allow you to fill out a battalion, and have a cheap OBSEC unit to contest some objectives, and are really the only troop that you might want to buy at the moment, as currently the Necron warriors aren't available separately. A Catan Shard of the Deceiver has been a staple in more competitive Necron lists over the last edition. His very crafty redeploying ability can allow you to put some really scary threats up in the opponent's face right from the start, such as maybe a Ghost Ark full of Necron warriors with Gauss Reapers for example, or maybe some Scorpec destroyers. It's incredibly powerful at the moment, though not necessarily guaranteed to still be there in the new codex. The model is a fine cast one as well, which isn't exactly ideal. If you just wanted to double down on the box's mainly melee theme, then more Scorpec destroyers from a second-hand seller, or Wraiths could be something to look into, though it would be noted that Wraiths seem to have got a bit of a profile nerf, again from those previewed datasheets, though obviously we don't have the full picture yet. Doomsides are another interesting option. They gained a bit of extra accuracy going into 9th, and could help to address the anti-tank deficit. They do have a bit of a weakness in not being able to score any objectives. Also, those Locust Heavy Destroyers and Canoptek Doomstalkers seem two other reasonable ways of adding in some long-range anti-tank to the army, and as easy build kits they should be at least relatively cheap compared with other options. I believe that these guys are scheduled to be released sometime within the next 2 or 3 weeks. Finally, Destroyers and Heavy Destroyers would be other decent options, at least rules-wise at the moment, but I would hold off on these until the codex has actually dropped and we've found out what the fate of them is in 9th. So finally, here's just a bit of an example of a 2000 point list that you could build starting from Indomitus as a core. So first of all, it uses literally every single model in the Indomitus box as a base, and is organised into a battalion and a vanguard detachment. The extra units that I went for are 2 Doomsday Arcs, just to provide some heavy anti-vehicle firepower sat at the back and also threaten infantry, a Ghost Ark to transport 1 unit of Necron warriors, potentially packing some Gauss Reapers, 1 unit of Immortals to camp objectives in the home field while the other units push up, a Cryptek with a Canoptek Cloak to do some healing shenanigans on any nearby vehicles and buff reanimation protocols, and finally a Catan Shard of the Deceiver for a little bit of mortal wound generation, but mainly to do some shenanigans with redeployment of either something like the Scorpec Destroyers or that Ghost Ark full of warriors. Bought directly from Games Workshop with no discount or anything, and that'd be £165 or $275, and obviously I'd recommend buying it in small chunks as you move up. To be honest though, I think that some of the Indomitus units just aren't all that strong point for point, and I will be tempted to replace the Plasmancer, the Reanimator, and the Warden with different units, something that's a lot more durable and hard hitting. Either more troops, more heavy support, or more advancing scary units. I'm not saying that any of these units can't be used, but the Reanimator is just a bit weak in its current form, and the Royal Warden only really works so well with units like big mass warriors, who could be quite susceptible to being tagged in close combat. In general, I think a more competitive Necron list will have fewer characters comparatively compared with the Indomitus box, and just get some more battle line units on the board. So if you are in the predicament of trying to expand your Indomitus Necrons, please let us know what's going on down in the comments below, and what sort of ways you're thinking of going with the army either before or after the codex drops. It's quite nice that there seem to be a few avenues that you can take now, with all this influx of new units and options. If you've enjoyed the video, then feel free to subscribe to Auspex Tactics for more regular 40k tactics related content. And if you've been getting good value out of my videos, I'd just like to mention that the channel has a Patreon page, which is down in the video description below. If you'd like to keep the videos coming, then any support is appreciated, and channel patrons get to see 1 video early each week. There are regular votes to see what sort of things come next for the channel, and also regular monthly prize draws, which patrons are entered into automatically. If any of that sounds good, or you'd just like to help support the channel, then please find the link down in the video description. In any case, a massive thank you for listening, and I'll hope to see you guys next time.